Hello and welcome to Team Liquid's Mythic breakdown of Belo'ren, Child of Alar, in the new raid March on Quel'Danas. Today I'm going to take you through everything I know about the boss and anything I think that could be helpful to your progress. Let's get into it. So to begin with, I'm going to just talk about the Mythic changes, and then we'll get into a type of VOD review with commentary and show you some raid plan style content. And then go into some final thoughts on tips and tricks for tanks, talk about the healer comp, damage optimization, and the class nerfs that happened on the 12.05 patch, and then we'll wrap it up. So, to start with, on Mythic, if a ball touches the boss, it's a raid wipe. Instantly, no recovery, no matter what, you're done. There are always 2 soaks. You can only kick the ads that spawn from those soaks if you are the same feather color as the ad. And then 4 is the Quill's AoE. So if you intercept a Quill, you'll explode in a radius around you, and if that explosion hits a player of the opposite color, they will definitely die, and a player of the same color will just take a significant amount of damage. So that being said, let's hop into the assignments and P1. So first I'm going to show you the raid plan here. So this is how the marker should be set up. We are going to start by pulling the boss to this corner. You can see this thing on the floor. Plant the boss right on it. And then the tank needs to position themselves in between the two both tanks need to position themselves between both potential wall spawns. This is going to allow them to get to the one that they have to go to the easiest. And the way that is decided is determined by our P1 strategy. Let's go over that quickly. The walls can spawn either, they always spawn opposite each other, and they can spawn left or right, looking at this raid plan, or top and down. And then either one wall is always yellow or light, and then one wall is always blue or dark. You can see in this one, it could be like this, but it could also be like this. And that is important because the tank's colors are randomized at the start of an encounter, right? So it could be a different tank every time that has to perform the clearing the close wall role, right? So in this instance, the yellow tank has to go clear with priority the balls that are going to come into the boss, and then clear a little bit more to enable the raid to move to the star marker for the first soak here. And this is the dynamic with either wall spawn. You can see in this case, the same thing is going to occur where the boss is here, the tank is here. The yellow tank in this scenario is going to clear bosses that would come in, or balls that would come into the boss with priority, and then clear a bit more to allow the raid to move directly to the correct marker, which in this circumstance is cross. So once you see the initial 2 wall spawns, you know that the next 2 walls are going to be the opposite variation. If this is how you start the encounter, the first soak is going on star, second soak will then go on cross, and vice versa. If this is how you start the encounter, the first soak will go on cross, and then the second soak will go on star. And the tank is always, a tank is always soaking the close wall in this phase, and it is random which tank that is going to be. So very important that as a tank, you are always aware of your color and aware that the wall is spawning in this phase, and you're checking and going with priority to soak as quickly as possible. Tiger's Lust, or getting extra raid movement speed, or any movement speed possible, is very nice, depending on the mobility of the tank that you are playing. So let's hop into the VOD here and go over phase 1A. We'll define now the first phase 1 as A and the second phase 1 as B, and then we'll have egg phase 1 and egg phase 2. So you can see immediately as we pull the boss, we see the orb walls go out. We can see that it is this variation here. So we are going to start with our first 2 soaks on cross. We're going to pull the boss directly here to this thing. The tanks are going to be central. And then at this point, the dark tank knows that they need to clear these balls that are going to come into the boss with priority, then finish up a little bit more to allow the soakers to go to cross. And then they'll come back to the boss and do the tank mechanic, pointing it away from the soakers, pointing the tank mechanic in this direction. And you can see this is exact dynamic occur. Let's talk now, since we're seeing the soak mechanic, about assignments. So It may be possible that there's a clean strategy that involves sending a large portion of the raid into every soak. But for this video, I'm going to present to you the evolved race strategy of using one immune player with every soak and then stacking the soaks directly on top of each other. The reason why this is better is because if you Venn diagram and soak with 2, it is the same as completely stacking and soaking with 1 because of the feather damage taken reduction from the color abilities of the same color as yourself. So this strategy that I'm presenting is an adaptation on the race strategy that my guild Velocity used. So we had only one mage, and so we substitute a rogue for the second mage, which you can see that scheduling here. In the case of second mage, it's very simple. You just alternate and then use them both together on the final set. Very simple. Now, the backup strategy in this strategy is very simple. Here you can see that the Void targeted player is always getting Sack Life Cocoon on the first set, and the Light player is getting PS from the Priest A. Now, if the Immuning Mage is targeted here, what they can do is still send their immune, and the way to not need a backup here is to move off. Let's say the mage is targeted by Void. You move off the cooldowns that would be on the immune player onto the remaining player, and then that will cause them to live. And that's a very clean solution. Now, if your comp differs from this priest, Mistweaver, that's completely fine. There's probably a way to schedule your cooldowns that is completely fine and playable. You're just gonna need to think a bit harder about what those are. So this is the immune soaks and external strategy. There's also a strategy with the orbs that involves hunters and the ret paladin. So whenever an orb set spawns, we're committing a hunter turtle to the far orbs, right? And so you'll see it in this VOD. You can see the hunter is going to be down here, and he's going to slam his turtle and then run up here, soaking all these orbs. And then when these orb walls collide or overlap, he's going to take this gate and go all the way through them and clear a ton of orbs, right? And that is the general strategy for P1A. You can see he's done this right here, and soaks a ton of orbs. It's very, very nice to do this. And that's the general idea behind committing hunter turtles in general. Now you can see there's a double assignment here with Bubble and the third hunter turtle. The point of this is to soak all the balls that are coming into the boss immediately following the first egg phase. So I'll bring this back up again later, and we'll go into why in more depth when that comes back around. The birds that the bird adds that spawn from these soaks appear in the air for the entire duration of the soak graphic. So if you can see here, as soon as the soaks targets graphic goes out, you can see in the air the birds are actually active and able to take damage, be focused, be cursed. And this is what you should do for consistency. Your warlock should be cursing them with Curse of Tongues in the air to make their casts more likely to be kicked when they come down. And then your DPS can pre-dot them or hit them while they're in the air, ranged obviously. And then your DK, you need to have a DK of some kind. They need to grip in both birds directly into melee range of the boss. Something else you want to assign is a taunt convention. So for instance, your ret paladin or some other melee, maybe your windwalker, doesn't really matter, any melee with a taunt, should then, after they get gripped, get taunt the ad. And you can do it with whatever convention you guys want to do. So maybe what makes sense to me is the first bird gets gripped in, taunted by some assigned melee, and the second bird gets gripped in, and it's always taunted by the Death Knight gripping it. But however you want to do it, completely fine. The point of this is to keep the birds in melee range of the boss, getting full cleave, to make sure that they die under the boss as well, so that when they become the egg version that has to be killed, they're still under the boss. And there are aggro issues because the tanks are in front of the boss, constantly getting knocked back away. So it's difficult for the tanks to get aggro, and they don't have, especially in the second phase, really any extra taunts to throw at the birds. So it's something, definitely a very helpful convention to be aware of. Something that you should also be aware of is knocking the birds under the boss if they are getting out of range, especially in the second phase. This is relevant. You can see here a good example. This bird is like starting to walk out towards me, and a nice ROP stacks it completely on the other egg, which increases its damage taken a fair bit. Another example, the boss is getting pulled away for the circle orbs in P1B, and you can see they just get that nice little boop from ROP right under the boss. So everyone with a knock should be aware of that and looking for that as the birds are dying. And then, like I said before, while the bird is in the air, all players with a kick should be focusing them to make sure that is covered in every instance. When it comes to quills, what you're going to do is you're going to have every player in your raid get a macro, or make a macro called /ping in square braces at player warning. And this is going to cause a player to ping themselves with this warning ping. And what you're going to direct players who are soaking the feather, the quill, to use this ping when they're planning on soaking. You want them to get as close to the quill as possible, because this circle explosion is very dangerous. And then you also want the target to not move horizontally, or I guess maybe perpendicularly is the better terminology, to make sure that this player doesn't get moved out of the soak. See, an example I'll show you in P1B is melee is targeted from a very far feather, and they move slightly, and then the player that was soaking gets moved out of the soak, and it goes by, and then it shifts the explosion circle, in this case into melee, which there's almost guaranteed to be a player of the wrong color in that circle, right, and then instantly die, which is exactly what happens. So you'll want to really watch out for that. If you are targeted by the feather, try to move as little as possible, unless your line is very short, and then you can move away from it to make it longer and easier to soak. Something I want to point out as well is tanks should be looking to soak feathers that spawn on the opposite side of the boss from the raid, because as there are tank mechanics going off, it is very difficult for melee to feel confident going in front of the boss to soak a feather, and it's very difficult to see them even coming through the boss as well. And the tank takes irrelevant damage to soaking the wrong color feather, and it's something that I've seen tanks kind of shy away from doing, and I think it's very, very good to do. So if there's a feather on your side of the boss, try to soak it if whenever possible. Something you'll have to be aware of in phase 1 is pushing the boss too fast. As we get the ramping damage buff and more gear, it's going to be harder and harder to hold in P1, to the extent that you're going to want to remove whole cooldowns from the phase and have players hold the entire phase until P2, because obviously you're going to want all your cooldowns on the egg almost no matter what. So something to be aware of. You can have your players like full prio the birds, pull the boss off of the birds to reduce damage on it. And right now that's a pretty good stopgap, but as the raid gains damage, it's going to be harder and harder to mitigate without like removing entire cooldowns from the phase. And you can see here that this orb set was the exact opposite as before. You can see that the light colored tank is the close wall is light, and the light colored tank goes and clears their path to the soak with priority, and then finishes up with the orbs that are coming into the boss due to this soak puddle. And you're looking to phase like 75% of the way through the cast, but anywhere halfway, 75% is fine. If the boss finishes this cast, it's going to cast orb walls, right? Either left or right, or front or back. In either scenario, you need to have your tanks go and soak the 3 middle orbs that would come through the boss in the middle, because in most scenarios, if you don't, the boss will dive into them to start the egg phase and collide with the orbs and wipe you. So it's just a small thing to be aware of, can prevent a wipe in the case of a slow push. Now going into the intermission, you're going to want to take note of your current feather color and whether it has changed. Something that is very good for this boss in general is the Belo'ren color debuff weak aura, which is like you could put this icon basically like near your player model to be more aware of it throughout the fight. You will need meek auras, the midnight weak aura fork, and you can find the link to this in the NSRT add-on or in Wago. but I heavily recommend people get that. Very helpful for the entire encounter, especially for tanks. So you gate to start this phase to negate the knock, and then you need to potion at the exact start of the phase here because it is exactly 30 seconds. So to get full value, you'll need to slam it basically as you gate or right after. And then you're just matching your color to the pie slice here. Important that you have movement speed throughout the entire duration of the phase, whether it's Wind Rush, Stamp, just make sure that you have something covering the entire phase. And then as these orbs come in, the appropriate colored tank is going to soak these 3 orbs that would come into the boss here. Only need to do 3. If you want to do a little extra, you can, but it's not super impactful. The minimum is these 3. If you don't soak these 3, they can collide with the boss on either side, or make it likely that a player of the wrong color soaks. Now, what you're going to want to do going into this phase, if you have a Guardian Druid, is note their color. So in this instance, Yips is yellow. So what we would say here is yellow needs help on the orbs, and players like Ret Paladin or DK or Devour or something tanky can assist with an Orb Soaker too. To give the Guardian Druid a little bit more leeway while they're absolutely blasting the egg. And that's about it for this phase. Just don't get hit by the opposite pie slice, don't greet it, but do maximum damage, have speed the whole time, have your healing cooldowns assigned, soak the orbs, and it's a pretty chill phase. Now, going into P2, as I said before, we assign 2 immunities right here. And the reason for this is we have all these orbs coming into the boss, and the boss is changing our colors, right, with Void Light Convergence. So it is extremely dangerous for a non-immune player to soak an orb because their color could get changed as they do, and then they instantly die. We have assigned the Ret Paladin Bubble to orange and the Hunter Turtle to green, to with priority soak balls that would come whose trajectory is headed towards the boss, and then after that to soak as many orbs as possible. And now I'm going to explain the P2 dynamic or strategy with movement. So here you can see all variations of P2 or P1B, sorry. And if you want to, an easy way to think of it is whatever walls spawn during the intermission will spawn again to start P1B. So you know how you're going to play the phase before you enter it. So in the intermission, in the VOD that I just showed you, these walls spawned. So we know as tanks that we're pulling to Skull right out of the intermission, right? And we're going to play the Void Light Convergence with the Immune Soakers are orange and triangle. And then our first soaks are going to be on Moon and Blue. And then we're going to move down this way and then go back to start the intermission. And then in the opposite pattern, where you get left and right walls in the intermission, you know you're going to pull the boss directly to triangle. Your first soak is going to be on diamond, and you're going to work your way in this way. So if you're a visual person, thinking of it as a diagonal rotation, and it's just inverted either way, was helpful for me. But as soon as you realize that in the intermission you can know which way you're playing the boss, I think that makes it very, very chill. That's how you play P2. So the soaking dynamic is a bit changed in this. So for this first soak, right, the boss is basically kind of here and it's getting pulled to like 2. And the dark tank in this scenario has to soak here. And something that I want to point out is that this wall is going to touch, or this wall of orbs is going to touch this wall. It's important that you clear with priority all the way to this wall, because the orbs that come this way, the player soaking can get knocked into them with the double stack strategy. So that's just something to point out briefly. And then the dynamic is a bit different where so the boss is here, the tank is soaking this way, and the hunter is soaking this way, which is a bit different from phase 1, where the hunter was always soaking like far and the tank was always soaking close. So it's just a bit different from P1A. And in the opposite dynamic, right, the boss is like here, the hunter is doing here, and then the tank is doing here. All right. Okay, let's watch P1B. So you can see the immunities going out, soaking around the boss, especially any orbs with bad trajectories, and then just as many orbs as they can. And we know from the intermission that we're going to moon. And you can see the tank soak there. And the hunter finishes up those orbs after the soak. And here's going to be a good example of what I mentioned earlier with melee moving with the quill. You can see in the P1B, we have gained a second quill, so we have one of each color, 1, 2. And you can see the dark quill is actually all the way back here. So it's very difficult. And this causes a death in this VOD. So you can see it's way back here, and Zebi is soaking it first. And then Hopeful steps into it. But then the targeted player, Lip, moves away. And it causes this soak to change to him, right? It misses Hopeful because of that move. And then, as a result, the explosion happens in melee, Trill is the wrong color, and then he instantly dies while the other people go to half HP. So just something to be aware of. We get a new mech in P1B, where we get this circle pattern of orbs. Should be a timer on it in Bigwigs, and it's going to target the center of the boss's hitbox. So the strategy is that when the timer on the orbs is done, you move the boss slightly away. And what this means is that most of the orbs are going to miss the boss entirely, and the tank just needs to soak maybe 1, 2, or 3 orbs that would come through the boss towards the center of the circle. So in this case, you're going to see Yips soak these 2. I think this is a good one to soak because it's going to come through the raid, and this one would come directly through the boss, definitely. Yeah, you can see him do this here, and that's very, very nice. Right, you can see in this phase, important that the tank mechanics are consistently pointed away from the raid and the soakers. You can see that they've positioned the boss, they moved it back slightly to be in a good spot for the next orb spawns. And you can see the tank clearing with priority from the wall, getting all the orbs from this wall out. And that's to prevent the soakers having any issues with being knocked into that wall. Right, you can see the ads are pre-cursed, which is very nice. Gripped under the boss. And our hunter is soaking for the raid as well. And a new circle just spawned and the boss was moved slightly. So this is where you're going to really want to pay attention to knocks when the boss is moving for the circle. The ads are about to die probably. A good knock can get them right where you want them to be. And very easy to never fail. And you can see an example of the tank doing the quill there, which is very, very nice. See, that's just lovely. And you can see the balls just bouncing away harmlessly as long as you get those ones that would collide from the front. And then you can see we're kind of chilling on the damage here to get the last soak, which we get here. And because we're going to phase the boss, our tanks are actually allowed to soak this and reduce the damage for everyone, which is really nice. But if you were to push slower, like in this VOD, you wouldn't be able to do that, obviously. So in this scenario, our boss damage is a bit behind. So our soaks land and our tank mechanic is still going out. So obviously in this scenario, the tanks couldn't get in it. Something to think about with your push timing in P1B is whether you need to do this for egg damage or cooldown timing. I know that 3-minute Ascendance relies on this and the main reason you were doing this was for Marksman Hunter. With the Marksmanship Hunter changes in 12.05, I'm unsure if it's still worth it to do this. And this is a significant point of progress, and it's very easy to wipe to miss kicks here. But I'll describe the strategy either way. So what you do is you send a bop on your Death Knight, and your tank goes into the middle. Soaking these orbs to allow your Death Knight to get like to the middle is nice. And then important that these ads be cursed, and they're just going to grip them in. And you want a similar taunt schedule as throughout the rest of the fight to keep them into the middle. So for instance, if the other tank has aggro and he's not in the middle, they would like walk back to him, which is unideal. So what you could do if you have a warrior is when they're gripped in, you could AoE taunt, or your DK just taunts one and the other tank taunts the other. That's completely fine. But the most important thing here is that no matter what happens, you get the kicks on the birds before they turn into eggs, and the rest of it is pretty straightforward. You're just playing another egg phase just like you did before, literally the exact same, except you have two birdies that should instantly die. Let's talk about tanking the boss. So the nerfs were that in P1 it only does one color of tank mechanic, right? And it's only on one guy, and it doesn't do the second, or like the double pattern. So before it did target one color, and then the double every time. So obviously it's a significant nerf, and obviously it was in a random order as well. So now in P1, all you have to do is this one tank mechanic every time, which is very, very chill. But what you should think about as a tank is the boss moving when you get knocked back. If you are Drakthir, and this was like the race strategy, or like competitive strat is to swap Drakthir on warrior, so you could instantly cancel the knockback, stay in melee range. And then obviously like Druid has a kick and wild charge to get back in melee. DK has Death's Advance. DH can press wings. Monk can light in there. But the reason why this is so good is because if you do get knocked back, the boss is going to move like half the distance that you get knocked back if you get knocked back fully, which can be bad if there are orbs coming into the boss, right? So that's just something you want to be aware of. If you can't cancel the knockback, you just want to be aware of that dynamic to the best of your ability. And then another thing I want to point out for tanks is when you in P1, you really just want to be cognizant of your pointing the tank mechanic. For instance, here, like this is a bit sketchy for the players running back. If it was more like this, then that's like very, very safe. And this is especially relevant in P2 or P1B, sorry, where you just really want to make it easy for your Stokers to live their lives and consistently point it away from the raid and the Stokers. Something you should look to do as a tank is kind of be aware of the DPS check and pull the boss off, like I mentioned. You can use the tank knockback to do this, or in this case, you really want to do it like beforehand. When it comes to these orbs, I'm going to show you like a difficult set. So in this scenario, this is like the hard version, right? Where it's very difficult not to take a stack. But in this VOD, if I had waited like half a second or done less orbs, I could have made it back or charged back, right, and not taken the stack. But you can see that even I do take the wrong pie slice, I wall and I'm completely fine, and I don't even use wall in the regular phase. So it's more important that you soak the orbs correctly than you get hit by the wrong pie slice, but just recognize that it's going to make you take a bit more damage for the foreseeable future. But in no way is it lethal, it's just something to be aware of. Something as well, especially as warrior, when you soak the orbs, this is something you really want to use like spell reflect for. If on any tank you just press nothing and run through like 10 orbs, you're going to take a lot of damage and potentially die if you don't have a cheat or a procure cheat. So just something not to be greedy with. If there is anything to be like greedier with, the tank mechanic is very does not feel very difficult at the moment, but just something to be aware of. And this is an example, like I said, doing this feather is really, really nice, right? Because it's through the boss, really hard to see, and obviously just really nice, right? You can see even I'm the opposite color, it's completely fine. And then this is an example of the ring set and how good like the wings are, just to like be very precise with the boss movement. But yeah, and then constantly just keeping this little gap between the soak area and the boss, and then always pointing it away from both the raid and the soaks. Definitely good guideline. Let's talk about comp briefly to wrap this up. So I mentioned before, I think you can make a lot of healer comps work. I think the only outlier is probably Resto Shaman, because they don't really have any external buttons to press on people. But other than that, I think you can probably make stuff work, even with if it's like one Arsham with like disc or something like that, or disc pres, you could probably make that work as well. Really, as you get more gear and buff, I think the boss is going to become more approachable from the burn standpoint. I think it's already not too bad, but something that is definitely very impactful, like for killing it in double egg phase, is Bear Druid. It's just miles ahead of the other tanks. Windwalker Monk is nerfed. I'm unsure of the current value of the Windwalker on the burn. Pre-nerf, it was Z tier with like Ellie Shaman, and a few other specs that were good were Balance Druid, Og, and Ellie. The Marksman nerf was pretty impactful. Like I said, I'm not sure the current value of taking in those two adds into the last burn, because a significant reason was the gain that MM got from doing so. Something that you'll have to gauge as you guys progress the boss. How important is the P2 egg damage in general? Like, is it worth making comp changes to do more? And that's just going to be something that you'll have to see, like how much easier it gets when you're progging the boss, how much damage buff you have, and etc. When it comes to tanking the actual boss, I think Bear and Warrior are very strong, but I think the other tanks can make it work. I think the only maybe exception is that Death Knight is going to really need some kind of speed increase to do the orbs well, like a slam at Tiger's Lust or an AoE speed maybe, to let them get the orbs. Otherwise, I think they'll be really struggling with just Death's Advance or Wraith Walk. But yeah, I think that is everything I wanted to go over in this video. I hope you found it helpful, and I hope your progress goes well. If you have any comments, concerns, thoughts on life, or feedback, feel free to leave it under this video, and I will see you back again for the full breakdown of Mythic Belo'ren, which will be an absolute banger. Excited to see you guys there. I'll catch you in the next one.